Good morning. This is about 6 a.m. IST over here. Welcome to yet another episode of Innovation Overdrive. In the previous session, I talked about how the product management function or product management organization is not much of a necessity in a retail e-commerce omni-channel setting, and I gave probably one or two reasons for it, primarily talking about how it could actually be more of a bottleneck function rather than an enabler of efficiency and innovation, which is one of the primary reasons why we tend to see product management established strictly followed by the books in these organizations. Now, that's obviously going to raise a lot of questions about what does that mean in the greater scheme of things. After all, product management as a function, I would say a capability, has only been improving over the years and has certainly created what we can imagine to be net value addition, especially in industry terms. When people talk about what have they achieved for their business and customers through software. Now, I would like to take that string of thought a little further to see if, in the absence of product management, there are multiple ways in which you could run the organization. Do those opportunities, do those organization structures not allow for the same level of innovation or efficiency to happen in the software development cycles, and in turn provide the value for business that product management is touted to be a strong contender for? But having said that, the product management opportunity is certainly very enticing because it's almost a pseudo business role, which also touches a lot of technology leverage activities without actually doing the coding, which kind of is, I think, what I believe many people tend to get excited or gravitate towards, right? So avoid the coding, get to do your work, and still, believe that you're the driver of the software capabilities being built. Now, having said that, the experts obviously wouldn't agree with me. The product organizations in several companies, pretty much all companies that want to do business in this retail e-commerce space, have gone through different levels of maturity cycles. One constant theme that I do keep hearing is just the fact that efficiency and success has always been a bit of a debatable situation in most of the companies. I have obviously haven't worked in all the companies, but I keep listening to sound bites on product management and keep reading the comments, which I can relate to, especially for people who are trying to bring out the challenges there. And of course, the experts dismissing all those challenges, saying what in more recent terms I've seen a bit of a subtle arrogance to saying, well, you haven't seen or experienced tier one product organizations. You haven't worked there, you didn't qualify to work there, so you don't deserve to know what product management is so great about. The question I want to tackle in this episode is, well, assuming that product management, well, we can say, well, it's not needed, it's not important, it's not useful, but the practical aspects of it is that, end of the day, you do need product management, or you end up having product management as a function in your organization, keeping the pros and cons aside. So now, assuming that product organizations do live and breathe in the context of a retail, e-commerce, omni-channel setting, who should lead product management? So the question would be, who should lead the product organization overall, right? So in terms of the hierarchy of reporting, this is one of the most interesting challenges and one of the most subtle white collar fights that I've seen in organizations, the ones that I have worked with or had the experience to interact at various levels of leadership in. And sometimes what I'm calling as fights are largely about displeasure about how this is being run. the product organization. And perspectives range from multiple thoughts and perspectives. One thing is that nobody seems to have hit a sweet spot. Everything is just one rolling cycle of change over the other, and one leadership pyramid shifting to another leadership pyramid, and so on. I personally believe that there are three contenders for the product ownership at the top, at the apex. One is the CEO himself or herself. The second is the CTO, and the third is a CPO, a Chief Product Officer. Beyond this, obviously, I think it doesn't make any sense to have any other leader run the product organization in a company. And again, my bias, my emphasis is on retail organizations. And the reason why I keep emphasizing on that is because retail organizations, especially when you talk about e-commerce, when you talk about buying and selling physical products, it kind of shifts away from the realm of internet products, software products, tools, capabilities that are virtual offerings to customers. There's no strong physical product attributes that you can attach to them. Like Facebook obviously is a social platform which basically doesn't allow you to have much of a physical product interaction with the customers. It's basically consumed over the internet. So those companies can still, I believe, work out their magic in product management, whereas I strongly believe the rest of the organizations that do not have this, or are a hybrid organization heavily biased towards physical products being served to customers, are better off rethinking their product organization requirements, and if not, their strategy. So coming back to the three contenders, going from the bottom, the third choice, which is the CPO or the Chief Product Officer, I believe that's a big no. The CPO role is an absolute waste of human resources. It just doesn't allow for any level of efficiency. The CPO, whoever he or she is, unfortunately goes through just the worst kind of expectation versus reality mind shift, and what I would call as pressure to deliver and perform under unreasonable constraints, which basically uproot the very necessity for the CPO to provide his or her strengths in terms of innovation, in terms of bringing people together from a product standpoint and delivering value and so on. The big part of this exercise would be then how do we make sure that if not a CPO, then who? In the CPO context, the other thing I would like to add is that CPOs unfortunately become managers of, I would say, hierarchical issues and noise. There's just a lot going on there. They just do not have the capabilities to manage too much noise in the system across the board. Business hitting from one side, the CTO's organization hitting from the other side. And there are just too many lack of leverage points for product organizations, especially the product heads, including down to the product manager, which just kind of escalates and grows in scale at a CPO level. You just cannot do what you're supposed to do. You can make a lot of money. You can go to forums and talk about how the company is innovating. You can certainly be a superstar in your own right, certainly well sought after, but you're not necessarily creating any value in the organization. So, which brings me to the second opportunity or option, which is the CTO. CTOs I've seen in general have a very strong eagerness to lead product organizations. There are actually two types. One who is actually very strongly leaning towards leading the entire product organization, bringing it under his or her fold, or an absolute hatred towards product management. They just don't want to have to do anything with them, if at all possible, which I know they don't get to have the full say on it, so they tend to be grumpy about it in meetings, and especially when meetings happen that question or bring up questions on what value has been delivered and has it been delivered on time and at scale. Scale becomes a very big question mark when it comes to these kind of situations. So the CTO certainly is another good contender. If I have to compare it with the CPO, the CTO certainly has what I would call as the technical chops, which people tend to disregard in the product context, and I think it's only to one's realization at a later point that people say, oh, well, a product management organization, after all, needs to be heavily technology savvy. They got to understand what the developers are saying, most importantly, what the architects are saying. And usually it's just a proxy statement saying, better be an engineering manager more than a product management leader. Right? A CTO will certainly have enough to deliver on the product management promises, but there are two fundamental issues, or at least a couple of fundamental issues with product being run by a CTO. The first is that a CTO will always be biased towards his software development organization, as a result biased against product managers, especially when it comes to decision making time. I've seen this repeatedly play out in different ways, both in subtle political moves as well as explicit statements and actions being taken by CTOs who have had the opportunity to lead product organizations. It gets ugly too soon, and usually the product managers in the bottom of the pyramid are the ones who get to feel the brunt of it. And the middle management layer really gets smashed big time, absolutely losing their staying power in the company, their self-confidence, and their own, I would say, ability to deliver or think they can deliver any value in the organization. The second one is CTOs, by the nature of how they've come in their career up the ladder, basically are people who have delivered software. They know how to get software out the door through leadership, through their own technical capabilities and strengths and so on. They will always consider product within the confines and constraints of what I would call as a software delivery paradigm, which in itself isn't bad. But what it does though is that sometimes the questions that need to be asked to deliver from a product standpoint, which is that product sense and the product execution capabilities based on prioritization, making choices, pushing back on requirements. A lot of those things tend to be assumed as deliverables in zeros and ones. Basically, you code, you don't code. Is it complicated to code? Is it complicated to execute on in terms of upgrading the systems, in terms of re-architecting something? Is the timelines useful to kind of get that done sooner? Do the engineering managers have the capacity to do this work? Is there the teams have enough headcount? Is a third-party vendor required? If so, is a third-party vendor someone who needs to get the full outsourcing deal to get that value and so on? Most of the CTOs, the thought process end up becoming more of these grinding thoughts around software delivery, things that need to get out the door, which means that sometimes the incoherence in terms of business value is very, very glaring, and the CTOs usually smartly sidestep such challenges by acting business-like and trying to project themselves as someone who understands what is required from a customer perspective. And in those situations, if for some reason they are weak, they tend to accommodate a few product managers so that they get that additional sound bites that are useful for them to just go ahead and then face business or then face the broader community and talk about their work. Otherwise, it tends to become where there's business, there are customer needs, there are things that are required to be done. They just wait for those things to be transmitted to them through some mechanism, and then the CTOs usually let their engineering managers interpret those needs and get the work done, especially when they don't want product to be involved. If they are accommodative to product, which many CTOs are, they tend to allow the product managers to get that perspective, bring that into a bit of a translatable form, and then emphasize on the product managers stepping away to let the software engineering managers and the hierarchy there run the show. Any conflicts, issues, just be ready as a product manager to face the heat, because the CTO is always going to be, as I said, biased towards the engineering organization. The other issue with the CTO running the product organization is that CTOs, as I said, by nature, in terms of how they build their careers, how they train themselves to think software first, and of course, they don't accept that. They usually say, oh, we are thinking about the customers and the business and so on. They don't think about running a business, even though they may be customer-centric. Being customer-centric in itself doesn't allow you to make the money required to, claim revenue and then basically make money for the company that will help pay for all the salaries and everything that you see the company basically spending money on. CTOs generally don't have the connect with the CFO or the finance teams in a meaningful way. They usually tend to talk about cost numbers rather than business value. Where business value is involved, usually it is a bit of a dirty exercise to kind of just get something out the door. CFOs and the finance organizations, which probably I'll cover it in a later stage, tend to usually build up their own numbers through other mechanisms. And there's always a bit of a tussle between the finance and the tech organizations. And those are interesting challenges in many organizations, especially the large ones. Making money is a different challenge altogether. CTOs don't work or haven't built their careers based on the idea of how to make money day in day out. That's not what they are thinking about. It's not a skill issue. It's just the fact that that's not center stage for them. And managing capital mostly for CTOs is about just not necessarily looking at how to spread your capital allocation or how to understand the ability to generate more capital. It's usually about cost management. What's your headcount? How many engineering managers should I hire? How many third-party vendors I need to manage? What are the software tools I need to buy? It's usually around how much cost I have to continuously elevate in the organization, but at the same time reduce the numbers so that the finance teams are happy year over year and still deliver value. So CTOs are also fundamentally struggling in most organizations, and building these cost expectations becomes their full-time job for the most part. Innovation usually happens in some other startup out there that's much more nimble, is doing the job of creating some capability, a B2B capability or some B2C plugins that just allow the CTO to move faster and save money. Saving money is not the same as making money, and CTOs are not great at it. Product management in general has the technical chops. When I say technical, it's the business capabilities to think about making money too. In retail organizations, product managers unfortunately don't get to flex their muscles too much in terms of how to make money. But where they do get the opportunities, a good product management organization certainly tends to deliver on that. And in fact, I would say if they're not delivering on that, then probably the product organization is absolutely not necessary, and you can just shut that department and save a lot of dollars. Because as I said, the industry experts and generally the sound bites that are being created for product management has made it a very expensive function or organization within a company. You have to pay a lot to keep a lot of grumpy folks grounded and deliver value. Which brings me to the final opportunities space in terms of who needs to lead the product organization at the top of the pyramid. And my recommendation is that it has to be the CEO. Yeah, CEO obviously has a lot of things on his or her table. Thinking about how to deliver on product is probably not the highest priority for them. But in the modern context, with AI also trying to create value streams within an organization and scaling up, and I would say innovating at a rapid pace, a CEO who is not able to relate too much with technology is unfortunately not worth staying in that position in pretty much all organizations. But having said that, I would probably emphasize more on the retail space, especially given that e-commerce, omni-channel, mobile commerce, whatever you want to call it based on your choice of words, terms. In these companies, you basically need to have a CEO who is able to understand technology, especially in the context of how to use technology to deliver value and create impact for the customers, and which is where the product organization comes in, and which is why a CEO needs to have a product organization under him or her. Now, the question then comes up is, how do you organize the product organization under a CEO, which I'll cover in my next episode. But having said that, product organization has many factors that lend to its non-existence, or basically its underutility in these organizations I'm talking about. I would still say that in the more realistic context, which is where you just cannot blow up a product organization out of existence, it's, I think, imperative that product organizations are under the CEO in a form and shape that allows the CTO to believe that he's getting the right kind of, I would say, technology leverage inputs to build the right kind of capabilities for both customers, external as well as internal customers, which are the employees, the external customers being the paying customers for the company. And I think it enables the CTO also to perform at much more efficient scale and form that wouldn't have happened if there's a CPO basically kind of hammering him from the other side, much to her annoyance rather than to a loss of power. And B, the CTO having the product organization within his or her own umbrella, which just makes the product organization just lose its relevance and die down naturally. You will just have people just hanging in there if the salary is good, and then just kind of create inefficiencies all along the way. So until next time, thank you very much. See you soon.